But we're here. We're live for session 2 with the legend, Mr. Nolan Bushnell. Just to recap for our friends who are just now jumping in, Nolan is the original co-founder, creator, innovator of Atari and the first blockbuster Pong games, and later on went to go and found Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time theaters and the first first in-car navigation system, and moved on now to work on VR and new gaming development, which we're soon to become aware of in the coming weeks, months, and years ahead. Nolan, thank you so much for joining us in session 2. We're going to talk about current trends, what you think about esports, and some of the projects you're working on.
Great to be here. Good fun. You know, I've often felt that sports fans are a way for an adult to relive their childhood. And I think that to the extent that you played high school football, you become an avid, football fan. To the extent that you were a junior high school basketball player, you became an NBA fan. I think the same trend is happening with people who grew up on video games, and now they appreciate uber skills, really good, skillful game players. And so therefore it becomes interesting to watch because they're really speaking to you in the language of games and nuance and strategy and tactics and all the things that we know and love about games, particularly in the multiplayer shooters and the strategy games. So I think that it's a natural progression. And I think it turns out that with the coronavirus and everything like that, I think that that it's the right time and the right place for esports to explode.
So, I mean, segue, you brought up esports, and that we were talking about, it's the new buzzword of the last 3 months, right? And it's been around for a very long time for heads like us. But unfortunately, it never got its spotlight until now. And it took a pandemic to keep us all at home to appreciate that there was no sports in the physical world, that esports was here to rise from the ashes of this pandemic and give us something to enjoy. We had ESPN run 12 hours on a Sunday. We had, BBC now running a full gamut of programming. And just not 4 months ago in December, around Christmas time, if I would have told you, Nolan, esports is about to take off right now, everybody probably would have said, yeah, we've heard that and we've seen it. What's it going to take? Well, it took a pandemic to keep us home. After this is all said and done, and we're now going back to our day jobs and daily lives, the NBA and NFL is back. Do you forecast this, progression that is now snowballing to continue to snowball? Is this a bubble of sorts? Not in a bad way. Bubbles can be good. Or is this a beginning of new innovation for game dev? Because now we need more. Now that the demand is there, we need to supply it.
Well, I think we're still at the Pong phase in esports, where, there's so much innovation that needs to happen before we get to sort of a quiescent state. I believe that esports is going to continue to grow, just as, like my wife wouldn't let my boys play football because of head injury and things like that. And so they don't have any affinity at all for watching football. Zero. Mm-hmm. My daughter, who played high school basketball, and she was pretty good at it. I've got a daughter that's 6 foot and could whip all of us. And she loves, and she's a fan of basketball. But my boys are all fans of esports because that's what they grew up with. And so I think that, I hate to say this, but I think football and basketball and baseball you may see things age out. For example, horse racing right now if you go to a horse race track, there's almost no one there under 50. And it's kind of, and when you see these massive racetracks, there was a time when they filled those puppies up. No more. It's aging out. And I'm not wishing for the decline of the NBA or anything. I'm just saying I think it's a natural progression.
That these traditional sports would go digital, right? Because I think obviously horse racing and basketball, baseball especially is losing a lot of audience, but on the digital front they're still all there, and it's just that that shift over to the digital side. So it's interesting to see what kind of do you see, I'd say, esports more within like the traditional sports and the traditional things that we see today, or the newer games that are coming into play? I'd say there's so many more strategic games that people these guys are competing in. What do you think is going to take over?
I actually think there will be an atomization in which it will be, we will not talk about esports 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like saying, did you go to see a sport today? You never do that, and so I think that there will be the genre of, there will be some physical sport analog, whether it be hockey or basketball or what have you. But I think that'll be about 20% of the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Then there will be the Call of Duty, Fortnite kind of construct that, let's call it war simulacrums. And I think that's going to be probably 30% of the viewing audience. What's going to take up the other half is yet to be invented.
And what do you think about like the AR, VR coming into play, especially from you? I mean, do you think that's going to be a bigger part of it, where you're actually kind of half physical, half,
What VR does is it gives you a heightened sense of immersive. Like, instead of just your window on the world being a screen in front of you and you're moving the camera around, now you're moving your head around, which is more of a better experience. I think that will be an important part. And but I think it's like, I've asked the question, what does a VR movie look like? Where now you're controlling the point of view of the action. Are you, and you're in the bar and you can focus on the girl on the bar stool next to your hero, or you can focus on the hero, or you can focus on the bartender. And does that give you better narration? Does that give you better immersion into the story? And I'm not sure. I don't know if you saw Bandersnatch. Yeah. It was on.
I was just about to bring that up, actually.
Yeah. I think that when you have storytelling, you tend to surrender yourself into that narrative. And you kind of lose your body and you're there in presence, but you're directed by the movie. The minute you make a decision, you're pushed back into your body. And so I think it shatters the permission to believe, the suspension of disbelief. So I'm not sure how VR and narrative works. Actually, I'm not sure it's an enhancement. It's something different, and just because we haven't figured out yet doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It just seems we haven't figured it out yet. I don't know. Does that make any sense to you?
You literally said Bandersnatch, because that's the first time the audience was given a choice to work inside of a movie, take control of a movie, yep, in essence, but not really, right? Because the outcomes were already completed. It was just a part of the roadmap that you took that gave you a different outcome. If we're able to go into the world of VR and, like you said, focus on certain things, right, and see certain things, then phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 of that version, now we're in the movie, now we're seeing certain things, like you said, looking and focusing at the people and things we want to. Bringing in the business aspect of it, because we all know there's a business connected to it. Not only selling these headsets is the obvious one, but when we're in the movie, you're seeing Amazon Studios, and some of Amazon's the only one that I've seen it so far, where in a scene, they'll show you, like us, there's 3 of us right now. And if I'm looking at Nolan's screen, I see that computer in the background. I can zoom in on it and say, buy. I can see, okay, the link will pop up on Amazon. It's this version of a computer, buy now. And that's extremely interactive from a business side that's gamified it. Do you see this in-game? Now I'm talking, that was the movie version of it. Now the game side of it, do you see that translating to the game side of businesses getting so businessy that not only do we have in-game advertisement, which is just around the corner, but now you can maybe click on that Coca-Cola in-game, pause the game completely, and go buy a packet of Coca-Cola. Do you see that around the corner, that Bandersnatch moment in games?
I see it happening. I don't see it being massively successful yet. I mean, I think that that any time you take away from the narrative, you lose something. And so I think you're seeing why do we pay a monthly subscription for Netflix or Amazon Prime? It's because we don't want to see advertising, a lot of those things
every 10 minutes.
Yeah. Like I can't think of the last time I turned on regular television. It's just, no, not me, Jack.
And so what I'm understanding is, go for it.
I was going to say, Nolan, do you think that we're still, on the cusp, I would say, where brands are really trying to jump in and, and get into the gaming space. Not only that, but mostly in the esports space right now. Do you think it's going to top over and that could potentially harm the space, I could say, if it's too,
I think that it's, the world is constantly innovating and testing, and some things are massively successful. Some things are just kind of successful, and it kind of sorts itself out over time. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is that an economy today, like 100 years ago, 100% of what you consumed was atoms. Now, probably half of what you consume in terms of your disposable income are bits. Whether it be movies, whether it be internet, whether it be games, what have you. So, and if you correlate that to wealth, the richer the society, the higher percentage of bits are consumed. Because you're housed, you're clothed, you're fed, and so bits tend to focus an awful lot on entertainment or business, knowledge, and so it's pretty clear that I think in the last 10 years more people have been risen out of poverty than any time before. Like it's massive how much richer the world is, and I think that trend is going to continue if we don't die of a virus.
That was very interesting. That's the first time I've heard that we evolved now consuming bits. And so we came from, to evolving and consuming massive amounts of bits, which makes sense because technology has advanced, the faster speeds, latency, file sizes for movies, the whole gamut for technology and beyond. Now, what is after this? We went from, gold to fiat to Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin's not there yet, but that's what people feel. And then we're going from, analog to digital to AI, which is a different version of digital, making decisions for itself. That analog, we had to input. Digital was a mixture of analog and digital. And then AI will be full digitalization with a mind and everything. What does that look like in the sense of bits? Will the bits keep evolving? Because as you said, this accumulation of wealth to be able to accumulate more bits and to acquire more technology per se, is this still in its semi-infancy? Because technology is 30, 40 years old. If we want to talk about the 70s till now innovation, is this what we call infancy of technology in your mind? Or is there something after to evolve out of bits to consume?
Definitely. If I really want to get philosophical on you,
get us.
How do you know that this isn't a simulation that we're in? How do we know? And I think that there are a couple of big problems, and it tends to revolve around haptics. That is, if you look at VR, we're probably at a 80% pathway for visuals. We can create visuals now that are probably 80% believable. We're at 100% in audio. We can absolutely make you think you're in a cathedral or a phone booth. Taste and smell, we're probably at 100% on smell. Taste, we're maybe at 5%. Haptics, that is touch, feel, our inner ear, that's spatial awareness, which is slightly different than haptics. We haven't even begun. And so I think that the Turing test for VR of whether or not we're in a simulation or not, I think fails on food, where you have texture and taste and structure and smell, and I think that we're a long way from that unless we can do a neural implant. Neo with the thing going in the back of his.
You're on mute, Kip.
I was going to say, I'm sure you've heard of the Elon Musk Neuralink, what they're doing there. What do you think about that? Because you did say simulation, and that's a very big theory of mine too, that I closely hold because I'm a technologist in the essence of we got here. How are we going to be now dragged into the future? And that's where the device like the Neuralink comes into play, because we aren't yet connected. We're connected on so many other levels, but we're not yet connected. So how do we know this isn't, essentially the simulation or the future?
Right. Well, I'm actually doing a little rethinking. Like I've been a big proponent of Hyperloop and, supersonic transport. And, the idea of being able to go to Japan in 45 minutes just really makes me excited. But I think that to the extent we can simulate going to Japan instantaneously is a different thing. And so how much of the sights need to be matched with the smells and, a good bowl of noodles and those kinds of things. And so I don't know. And you know, what's right now the difference between being there and not being there is bandwidth. I mean, when we're there somewhere, we're taking in information across the board at massive gigabits a second. And actually not so, but we fake it. The human being is great at faking low bandwidth for high bandwidth outcomes. So I guess the real issue is, I've always said the future to me is get rid of everything that pisses me off, you know. And so, for example, I live in Santa Monica, and I'd like to be able to get to downtown in 5 minutes any time of day. 100 miles an hour, Santa Monica to downtown, 5 minutes.
Impossible.
And so how do we get there? Well, self-driving cars are part of the answer because it expands the capacity of a freeway. And, you know, I just hate the clutter of automobiles. You know, if you've ever been to cities that don't have cars, you know, whether it be Zermatt or Venice or what have you, it's nicer. And so I want all vehicular traffic to be fundamentally underground, so that I call it the gardening of cities, where take anywhere that's asphalt and think of it as grass. And if you want to go somewhere, you just, you know, there's a stairway on the corner, and you go down and you get into a self-driving car. And it takes you where you want to go,
Just
for
like
an Uber.
Just like a metro tunnel.
Yeah.
Shoot.
But now it's individual, so you don't have to be the crazy homeless guy.
That's interesting, because like 99.9% of technologists out there, people working on projects, you don't have to be a genius to just type it on Google and figure it out, that everybody's going above ground. Now, you just said something that your idea would be to go below ground and to take advantage of that system. The Hyperloop even is above ground in the first test models they're testing. Yep. In, I believe, Vegas or here in Mojave Desert. But you just said something, again, very contradictory to what innovators are innovating on. And everybody's going this way, and you said go this way. Everybody's looking for the flying car and the faster horse in the Ford example. But you were working on the horsepower and the engine, because you've seen and look at societies like Germany and Russia of old and what they innovated on greatly. And a lot of it was underground, which is why the rail systems of Europe are so, popular, and they're still functioning at high rates. Is that how you've always thought? Is that like everything I've learned today from you? You're always not against the grain, but technologically innovating against what everybody's doing. And you just said, they're going up, you're going down. You've obviously thought of this through a process of, like you said, if you think of asphalt like the grass, I've never heard that be said. So when you think of and you open your mind to allow it to think like that, things like the Neuralink, things like the technology that you're talking about are very real. This Hyperloop system underground is a very real thing.
Well, not just that. For a long time, getting above ground takes a lot of energy, because you not only have to motive, but you have to fight gravity. And when you apply energy, you almost always create noise. And noise is a pollutant that actually is really, really harmful. For example, I never, ever get on an airplane without noise canceling headsets, because, when you're on a 5-hour flight and you get off and you're tired, it's almost all noise fatigue, because just sitting on an airplane seat's no big deal. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, most airlines are running at 85 to near 90 dB. And if you listen to a movie, the human being always sets the volume of a movie 10 dB above background noise. And so if you're putting 10 dB on top of 85 dB, you're at 95, and that's massively fatiguing. So I digress. I just think that that going above the ground is a pollutant. You know,
Interesting.
I don't want to look up and hear or see stuff.
Right. Right.
with maybe an exception of a bird.
No, I mean that's very innovative, and to think like that is like I said, is it opens up pathways in the brain to be able to solve more problems, because we've been taught a certain way all our lives, and we've seen things above ground be stigmatized and pollutant, and obviously, but we don't seem to be innovating it. We don't seem to be doing anything with it. But somehow technology in the computer every year advances more, like we've gone to a new moon or a new solar system. But the car and I would argue maybe the airplane and certain bigger machines have not really innovated in 100 years if you look at the car. And so here comes Tesla and that new one, Nikola. That's going to be the truck company. Now, this truck company is worth, I think, $42 billion market cap, and they haven't even their own manufacturer plant. They haven't produced one single car. The first one's coming out in 2022. Now, isn't that what esports is doing, to bring it full circle? Isn't that what esports and technology is doing? It's like right now, esports is pretty bland if you think about it in the technology sense. We're just hitting keys still. After 20, 30 years, we still are. The faster you hit the key with muscle memory, the more championships you'll win on the higher stage. But now with VR and some of these things coming in, we're bringing in the physical world. Is this in your idea, the expediting of the technology, or is this just the natural next step?
Is this staying over ground, I would say?
There's something happening in esports that tends to not be part of what I consider to be the natural progress of things. And that is, in general, as games become hyper competitive, they simplify themselves. And like the other thing about esports is they tend to be walled gardens. And, you know, like when you talk about, you know, Call of Duty, it's a walled garden. You know, there is a company behind it who really controls the aspects of it. And I actually believe that in the next little while, there will be some simple templates that are programmatically generated so that the terrain or the playboard or the puzzle is new each time, so that it's not just muscle memory. I think muscle memory is not a sufficient skill set. I think that you have to add almost a holography of different senses and sounds and solutions. When you play a tournament game of chess, you never play with a fancy set. It's always the black and white wood pieces that were the traditional. Same thing with the game of Go. You know, you would never play a tournament game of Go with anything other than white shell, black slate pieces. I don't see a similar thing in esports yet, and I think it will emerge. In fact, one of the things I would do is I've got some ideas on how to do that, and I think the trick is programmatically. I think you have to have a game that is its own, that has an ability to morph itself. Anyway, I could wrap on that.
No, I mean, you know, what I got out of that is, look, your passion now has led you to create games like your what we read in your bio is that it's easy but challenging to master. You shouldn't be, like you said, muscle memory should not be the factor that makes the $1 million player the $1 million player. The difference of, the Kobe Bryant or the Michael Jordan analogy in esports, in my opinion, is not there yet. We cannot make an analogy because one esport player is the winner. So there's a famous player, I'll end it on this and would love to get your opinion. Famous players are only becoming famous in esports because of their amount of championships. So if the guy won 5 times in a row, they attribute it, he must be the best. Well, most of them come in teams. So there's 4 other players, and that's a lot of aspect. But the Michael Jordan moment in NBA that everybody glorifies, or the Wayne Gretzky moment, was they out-practiced everybody. They were naturally better physically. Their mental was the strongest of anybody. The mental was the strongest. And what you just said there in that last sentence was, in a chess game, in a game of Go, the mental takes over, because who cares what the board looks like? Who cares what the playing field even looks like? Because my mental will outbeat yours. I don't think we're there yet in most of the esports, because it's that muscle memory, best player moment, who played the most. So you're saying we need more challenging thought process games.
Correct. Well, there's another. There's another one that I want. I like the idea of a spectacle. Now, imagine, if we would, the game is capture the flag. Okay. There's a blue flag somewhere on the East Coast and a red flag somewhere on the West Coast. T equals 0. Everybody signs in. And if you're east of the Mississippi, you're on the blue team. If you're west of the Mississippi, you're on the red team. And you all start at a point 0. The objective is war and to take the other flag. Okay? Now, as you move east, there will be vehicles that you can find to get you faster. There may be an airplane you can find. And pretty soon, you aggregate the weapons of war as these things. And hopefully we've got 1 million people on each side. And now we have sportscasters, or reporters that are flying over the battle scene, reporting to everybody who's watching Twitch what's happening. And I just think it could be mayhem and the most fun. And when you get killed, you don't get really killed. You just get transferred back to the starting point. So you have to make yourself go forward again. So you're not really out of the game.
Right. I mean,
now, wouldn't you want?
Yeah, I mean, that's interactive. I mean, that's the most interactive I can do with my friends across America, with solving, latency. And I know we've taken up so much of your time, but I just wanted to put a plug in. And if you wanted to say anything about the current project you're working on that's actually dealing with speed and dealing with that issue of what that looks like in esports, anything you want to say about what you're working on to solve that problem?
Well, I'm doing a series of board games in my company, Versix Games, that use the Amazon Echo and the Google Home as a way to enhance the experience. Got some great games coming out this fall. I think that I'm having some fun doing, some good gambling games, working with a company in Las Vegas to skill gaming. Company's name is Synergy Blue. And when you go to Vegas, you've got to play some of their games because they are really, 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 really fun. I'm working with a company out of Canada called WT Fast, which deals with latency and minimizing router hops for esports.
And that's huge. And that's huge, right? And
That-
how are we gonna minimize the gap of the world's problems in esports without this, right?
That's the future of esports. I could, obviously when you have teams all over the place, that's what's going to advance it and take it to the next, next step.
Well, you actually can't solve it without quantum entanglement because you got speed of light.
Yeah.
And so if you bounce off a satellite right now, that's almost 400 milliseconds. So, you just don't fix that ever. How you can do that is by designing the games so that they're quasi turn-based, so that you zero out the latency. But nobody's done it yet, so that's something
for the audience to know that and it's not too technical, but the reality of being able to become global in esports is to knock down the wall of latency. And as we heard, it's near impossible right now because there's so many hurdles. But with the advancement of the technologies, this is the only way the world will be able to compete on a global stage. Because right now we have League of Legends that's supposed to be hosted in China in, I believe, September or October. Well, that's 100% not happening. And it's 100% not happening there, but they have to figure out something. I don't think they're going to figure this out this year, but in the years coming, what Nolan's working on with WT Fast is actually solving that exact problem. And so that teams can stay at home, emissions on the earth and traveling costs and everything from A to Z, they're solving just through latency issues. So that's just for the audience to know how that works. Nolan, we've gotten you for so long. Anything else you want to add there, Jay?
I wanted to ask you one more. Obviously, there's so much going on in the mobile space. I think that's a huge one that we didn't touch on. I wanted to get your opinion on what you think that looks like in the future, and how obviously esports is there's a big segment in the mobile space, and that's in and of its own another world. What do you think that looks like, and do you think that's a trend that should be followed, or is that gonna quickly fade?
Well, I think that one of the things that I'm hopeful for is that they'll make it so that I never break a screen again. I think that mobile has a problem of visual bandwidth. The screen's too small. And no matter what happens, our fingers are so big. And I feel like there are ways, and one of the ways is I think that we are going to get glasses that are part of the mobile experience. And not like Google Glass, but I think there will be something where we can have a virtual image of a 36-inch monitor that is in the back of the seat in front of us and on an airplane, but virtually, and I think that until that happens, a mobile phone will be inadequate for a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the gaming markets of the physical consoles, and we just saw PS5 come out with Sony, and then the Xbox box, the Xbox is coming out. But I think mobile has shown with children, just like in the 99-cent Apple Music days, that's more popular because microtransactions are going to win with the children, whereas an adult rarely will buy a skin or something else, and that's where mobile is really winning.
Well, it's also a lot of newer games, right? Mobile, you're able to develop more games on the mobile, so and it is becoming bigger and better. So it's interesting to see because it's easier to develop more games there, whereas console and PC, it's a bit more you got to work longer. A lot more complicated. So,
Nolan, I greatly appreciate your time. We went over a little bit, but our audience is super grateful. We're super grateful. Thank you so much. If there's anything else you want to add, we're going to definitely need to catch you again on to go into deep of. I'm blown away on some of the things I've been taking notes about, but we learned a lot today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure, Nolan. Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody for being with us. We're going to say bye to Nolan here and wrap it up. Thank you, Nolan, again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Be good.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. We have a few more minutes, but just want to wrap it up with some thoughts from each other. And it was pretty eye-opening. I heard underground, above ground. Everybody's going this way, you go this way. Innovate, take a break. Relax, step back. It's like 20 life lessons we just learned, but in technology, sometimes what we heard was take a break, step back, and let your mind apply after taking it all in.
Definitely. I think, he's, his mind works in such a fantastic way. He's always thinking against the grain, and it does take a minute sometimes to step back and rethink the process. And I think that's what gets his creative juice flowing, which is something that a lot of people can't do. Just go. So it was great having him on.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane how his mind works, because he was talking about numbers of every number, first of all, we had wrong in our bio. Every number we had wrong, and he created it 2 years earlier. He was 2 steps ahead, and it was so humbling to understand that nothing on the internet got it right. Nothing about his story is correct on the internet, and you hear it, and it just blows your mind. If we can all think like that to solve problems, just open that door that we didn't think would give you the answer. Think of a different thought process. You're going to have the next Atari, because that's literally how it was born. I don't know. It was just crazy. No, we don't have too many people like this on Earth. We really don't.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. We didn't even touch on the fact that, this man hired Steve Jobs. And,
was going to.
Well, he did work for him. He did work.
Yeah.
That's something I wish.
Yeah. True.
That is something I wish.
I wish so too. But to be honest, I wanted to hear about the gaming industry. But you and everybody out there, you should check this out. Steve and Wozniak, Jobs and Wozniak came over to the garage of Ted and Nolan, and they were before them technically. Not like they were before. They're better than Apple, but yes, they were before in the roadmap. And they said, hey, throw in some money into this, company, and we'll throw in some money. And they said, no, we're just too busy with this. And it was just such a respect thing.
And makes sense, though, because these guys were growing so fast.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for both sides. Why would Steve entertain working for Atari? And why would Nolan entertain even putting $1 into Apple?
Or a second, because he couldn't breathe.
It's very logical.
Yeah,
it's amazing. To think what could have been if that one joined this one, or if this one joined that one. We might not be having this conversation. With iPhones in our hands.
He is really someone to follow in today's. I think this guy, in so many different things, verticals, areas, is someone to keep an eye on. And
there's definitely more
another one I would have loved to ask is, his thoughts on Atari today, because it's obviously completely, it's so much different than where it was or what he started his.
And to be honest, we have another minute, and this is a passion of both of ours. So let's talk about it for the final minute. Is it's not to bash on the current version of Atari. All right, that what they're doing is fantastic, but from what we just heard in innovating, in everyday grind of innovation, you cannot compare what's happening right now in the current version of Atari to whatever had happened. And I would argue in any game development right now, look at what Amazon doing, and Crucible was not so hot. it's not a good game. It's not going to be an esports competitive game. So throwing money at the situation with less innovation is not the answer.
No, especially what he was saying about the gambling, the mafia style, which he had to fight off to get Atari going, really. He had to fight off that stigma, and that's where they are headed now, more towards the betting side of things. I know they just, launched a token, and they're doing a few things, I think they're doing
they're doing the Atari chain, and they're doing a hotel and stuff,
so they're moving towards an area which he did it, so it's crazy to see. And definitely we'll get him on again. I think, we want to do so much more with him. We're so happy, and
we're very fortunate we're very fortunate to be working with him, and that we're going to leave that for later phases. But there's some good news coming up from what GIMA is doing and what Jay and I are doing with Nolan, and we're very just super positive and happy to be working with him and his team and everything that we've learned in the industry and from him. So thank you guys for joining us for session 2. Thank you so much for being with us. Take a look at session 1, which was on health and wellness. And next week, we're going to be talking about tech, all things tech and gaming, blockchain, AI, and some more VR, AR stuff. So take care.